So this is a summit about data and technologies, but I somehow decided to talk about culture rather than talking about the technologies in that field. And I'll kind of explain how we came to the idea and why culture is important today and what organizations have to do to bring it out. But literally, we started researching it because of a conversation that I had with a CIO of a company. And it was a logistic company. They're a heavy, big user of everything from ETL, data management, to BI and analytics. And he had a very simple question. He said, why didn't my organization invent Uber? And then he took me to his command center, and you could see the screens. And he had on his screens the exact application that they tracked every car going everywhere and the logistics. And then they had dispatchers on the phone sitting and connecting customers with the drivers of the car. And it's really mind-blowing that they didn't connect the dots. And so his question is, what do I need to do in order never again to miss on any opportunity that's coming along? And I would explain why these opportunities like Uber are so important nowadays in the world we live. And we started thinking about it, and he literally told me, he said, they didn't connect the dots. They didn't connect the consumer with the applications and the technologies that we have in place. And he said, what can I do to make sure that my organization never does this mistake again? And so we came with three things that have to change the mindset in the organization in order to move from where we are today to more cognizant about data-driven opportunities and how to turn the data that they have into business models and revenue streams. And so the first one is treat data as an asset. How many of you treat data as an asset? We all talk about it, but you really treat it? What makes data an asset, I'll ask you? Okay, you're not treating it as an asset. You're using it as an analytics. That's exactly what these guys did. They analyzed every traffic, everything. They analyzed it, and then they had the analysis, and nothing happened with the analysis. So you need to do something more. The one thing that you need to do, and that's change number 2, is you need to innovate with the data. If you have it, and if it's an asset with it, like if you are in the car industry and you have physical plants and assembly lines and etc., you have to innovate with it. And there are many examples. If we have time, I will talk to you about pure innovations coming out with data and generating revenues with data products. So that's number 1. Do you innovate with data?
Let's wait and see.
Let's wait and see, okay. I put you on the spot, I apologize for that. The other one is really think data monetization from the get-go. Don't leave this behind. So most of the companies already have too much data. And today they talk about data monetization because it's a buzzword. But actually, when organizations start collecting data and start putting the systems, they don't talk about data monetization. And they don't tell you, most importantly, how you get to data monetization, which is how many of you have seen methodologies, how to monetize data, how to begin thinking about how to monetize data. It doesn't exist. But if you go into manufacturing, you would see such methodology. So these three things are foundational, and we started kind of researching and seeing what we should deliver in terms of technology to enable this culture. So talking out a little bit about the new business reality and how it drives the emergence of this culture, we all are moving to Industry 4.0. This is the 4th industrial revolution. That's a combination of 4 things. It's essentially sensors, data collection through the sensors, analytics on the sensors, and monetization through actually innovation and monitoring of outcomes within the processes or the environments that we manage. So why does Industry 4.0 matter and how it relates to the culture that I mentioned and to the logistic company I spoke of? The number 1 reason is that the first movers in any industries, the companies that take advantage of the data, secure very quick competitive gains. And the second one is the winner often takes it all. So these 2 things put us in a hyper-competitive environment. So if you think about Uber, has anybody been able to take any market share from Uber? We had Me Too companies coming up all the time, inventing different alternative models, And yet, none of them has been able to take any market share from Uber. In the physical world, this was not happening because it would take time to build new plants, new facilities, and etc. So there was a significant time lapse that you could use to catch up with the first mover in the industry. But that doesn't happen with Industry 4.0. When we look at the enablers for Industry 4.0, and this is a global survey conducted by PwC, there are three that stand out. The first one is data analytics and digital trust are the foundation of this industry. So really, we have to put it at the core and really manage it in a way that we deliver revenues. The second one is that data analytics have to become enterprise-wide, what we call pervasive, and that requires a significant cultural change. And I'll talk later on about why pervasiveness matters. And finally, the digital relationship should extend to the customers too. So this is the foundation of Industry 4.0. So now moving to I keep losing this microphone. Can you hear them in the audio? Okay, thank you. So we went back and said, okay, now we understand data is an asset, innovate with data, do all these things. But what's the relevant methodology to get you to the end point? And there was a saying that data is a crude oil, the new crude oil. And we thought, well, let's look at manufacturers. What do they do to convert raw resources into finished sellable goods? And when we looked at that, we studied a lot of companies. We actually found a paradigm in Toyota and what they did in order to become the #1 car manufacturer in the world. So they used a very simple methodology called the value chain. And in their case, they said, we start with raw materials, and through each step, we're adding value. So what are the total steps that you take that get you to a finished product? And then they would write underneath check boxes and say, we do this, we do this, we do this, and they analyze it and make it more efficient until they streamline the entire process. And so I said, well, if data is crude oil, it should fall in the same category. We should treat it as a physical asset, and we should manufacture it and move it through the value chain in order to produce a finished product that we can monetize. And so we looked at data collection, then we do all the data management and all the tools about that, and data movement and enrichment and etc. And then we put on top of that analytical tools, and we do analysis. And that's actually the most serious realization, is that most companies, about 95% of the companies, stop at this step. They do, like you said, we've done the analysis, everything is done, and I'll give you examples why later on what analysis is and how it's different from everything else. And they stop there. But that creates a data asset that actually does not create anything that you can monetize. An analytic insight, an analytic fact is not something that you can monetize by itself. You need extra steps to move to the monetization. And so the only way we're going to monetize data is through actually building decision management applications. Because if we make decisions better and we make processes more efficient, we can realize cost savings, or we can realize additional profits. And the final step is, the land of opportunities, is to use data to make customer-facing applications. And a lot of them can be a direct revenue source or an indirect revenue source. So when you ask a company and say, where do you stand in this process? When you go through the data, you see that most people would check these as check marks and say, yeah, I've done this, I've done this. And in fact, if you look at the analytic tools, the market for analytic tools is 100% saturated in Europe and the US. So everybody pretty much is doing this. And yet I consistently hear at conferences that very few people get ROI on the analytics. And that's precisely because we don't move this to the next two stages when we can actually monetize it. So we call this the data value chains, to help people move through all of these stages and get to the monetization opportunities. Now, why do we need pervasive fact-based decision-making and a culture for that in the today's business world? Let's look at that. So when we look at what's the status of BI and analytics in general in the enterprise, we have less than 30% adoption rate. This is a very, very low type of adoption rate for any industries. And despite the fact that we've been talking about information and analytics without barriers, democratization of data, democratization of insights, democratization of analytics, we're still stuck into these 30%, and they cannot enable many the rest of the enterprise employees to make fact-based decisions. When we look at it from an organizational perspective, it's literally striking. We see that literally the people who get information are here at the strategic level. This is the 20-30% cutoff point, really occurs at the top level. And when we look down, operational employees, partners, suppliers, customers, citizens, they have very limited access to information and for decision-making purposes. And so why do these layers matter? If we think purely from an organizational perspective, because all the money, all profits and losses happen on this layer. They don't happen. All strategic decisions can happen here, but money and losses are made into this layer. So if we think of the companies that have been extremely successful, who has given information pervasive to all of their partners and suppliers and changed the retail industry entirely? Walmart. They decided to give information to everyone, including their employees, procurement. They decided to give information to everyone, the same information, and have it on the day. Why did this happen? It actually happened historically 30 years ago. Procter & Gamble was meeting with Sam Walton to deliver reports on the sales of diapers. And it was coming through our technology, the reports. And when they went to talk to him, they explained how many units of diapers they shipped, how many to each state, and etc. And at the end of the meeting, Sam Walton asked, I said, I had only one question and you didn't answer it. What's the one question? The most important question. Did I make money? And they couldn't answer it. And he sent them back and to find that, and they went back to him and said, actually, sir, we lost money. On every sale, we lost that much cents or dollars or whatever it was. And he looked at the report, called his lieutenants and said, if I get this information a year later, there is nothing we can do and we'll be out of business. If we get it every day, at the end of the day, we can manage it and we can be profitable. If our suppliers get it every day like we do, they know what to do with the costs too. And that started a $700 million investment into Retail Link, which at that time was very expensive, but today you can do this at the fraction of the cost and get to these decisions. So many examples of how pervasive information distribution and fact-based decision-making changes the history of companies. So when we look at the next stage is how do you do that on an operational level, and it's striking. We know how to do that on the strategic level very well. But the reason I like this chart is because it showed for the first time a very important relationship between the time to make decisions and the type of decision. And so when we look at strategic decisions, that's the time when my CEO calls number of people in IT and says, can you produce for me this report, or can you do this analysis? And it might come a day later, 2 days later, it doesn't matter. But when you are in operations, decisions are made within minutes. So we actually, if we're going to do pervasive decision support and decision management, we really have to rethink how we are delivering the information to the frontline workers, because they need to access the information and make a decision within 3 minutes max. That's kind of the cutting line that, in my estimate, is the most important. And I'll give you examples about that. So very important relationship. So that relationship is not actually unknown, but it has been unknown in the BI space. So when we think about it, I'm bringing this book. It's a behavioral economics. He got a Nobel Prize in it. He explained very well how the brain works and said there are 2 systems in the brain. There is the fast system, and evolutionary we build it because we need to make a decision whether to fight or run away. If you see this big brown thing, you have to decide if it's a bear or something else and stay or run, and that's a life-saving decisions. And 95% of our decisions in life are made with this system. They're very quick, they're flash, and etc., but they're prone to errors. On the other hand, you have the slow-thinking system, which is analyzes everything and goes into depth of every possible situation, but it is very slow. So if you're sitting out there in a real life, and you deploy that, it might put you in danger. So we have to get on this continuum because, and it's well known, analysis paralysis, that's what goes to the slow thinking, and then too quick, there is a lot of biases when you get into the quick thinking system. So the point of this is that an organization functions in exactly the same way. Your strategic thinking, the people that are up in the prior slide that are here, they're the slow system in the organizations. They're the people who look at the long-term decisions and they take the time to do the analysis. But if you have to enable the front line, then you have to think about the fast system and how it works and what it does. So that parallel actually kind of conceptualizes for us the differences between the choice of technologies we'll make in order to support pervasive intelligence in the system. The other thing that's striking is that many people don't make the distinction between the analysis and decision making. And so when we go between they're very different activities. When you're going to do analysis, you're asking why and how, and people spend time to explain things. When you're doing decision making, you're pretty much going to choices and say who, what, when. Very different paradigm. So the people that are with the slow system, they do the analysis, and we have to give them the right tools, whatever they are, whether these are data scientist tools or ad hoc analysts or data visualization people, they have to have these. But when we move to decision making, we have to support the people with applications that help them make choices within a very short time frame, and that requires entirely different technologies. So if you look at the segmentation in the space, you have about 22% of people who are supporting the slow thinking system for organizations to move into strategic directions. And you have about 78% of the rest of the employees are operational people who want to make choices. They don't want to do analysis. And for a while, there was in the organization, let's democratize the data and turn everyone into a knowledge worker and make them learn how to do the analysis. And I was sitting with the chief of police in Chicago, and I said, what do you think? Shall we give the cops the analysis? And he looked at me and said, what? You want them to watch an Excel sheet, or you want them to watch the criminals on the street? Pretty obvious choice for him. So there is literally, yes, we have to give them information to make choices, but we can't expect them to make and spend their time doing analysis. So the do and don'ts when we go through that is number one, like I said, here was the comment, this is a chart about making people more productive and how they spend the dark chart, the dark line is how people spend their time to please the boss, and the white one is what they should be doing to make the customer more happy, and this is frontline people. Somebody's laughing there, probably knows very well that effect. So when you look at the activities about pleasing the boss, the number 2 activities of wasting time is produce data for reporting and complete forms and reports. And this should take actually everyone very little time to do so they can spend the time to something else. So we cannot do this and take from the time of productive people and turn them into unproductive because we want them to do more analysis. And this is really how organizations feel today. They feel that they are report rich but information poor. On average, a Fortune 1000 US company has between 25,000 and 50,000 reports. So they're practically a lot of maintenance. Somebody's mailing. Are you in that situation too? So they have a lot of reports, but they actually cannot find the information. So we did a lot of research on that, and the wrong approach to operational user is don't give them the data. They don't care about the data. So this whole premise of self-services, give them the data and let them do it everything themselves is actually false, because as somebody pointed to me and said, giving them that is giving them everything but the service. And actually we have to give this service. Giving the operational users to the tools to do the analysis. Both of these put them in the top category of time wasting. So for those professionals in the slow system, yeah, tools are great because that's what they need to do. But for those guys here, we have to rethink the approach and move them into apps that produce choices behind the scenes based on the analysis and the things that have been done. So these apps, Booz Allen Hamilton actually was looking into how to deliver and what we do. They call them data products. And when we look at the critical point in this definition is that the data products provide actionable information without exposing decision makers to the underlying data or analytics. That's very important. If I give you a tool, if I give you Excel, I'm exposing you to the data and I'm exposing you to the analytics. If I build you an app that gives you the choices, I'm hiding all this complexity from you and focusing your attention at the choices that you have to make. So it's a very different purpose that we serve when we give those to operational decision makers. So to give you an example from an industry about helping people making choices, it's a game-changing data product that's Expedia, the travel site. And the reason it's game-changing because it really made ticket booking a self-service activity, and it eliminated the travel agents. Why is it such a great example about that, how it supports a decision? First of all, you can reach and book a flight in less than 6 minutes. So research and book a flight. So what they found out is if it takes the user more than 10 minutes to do that activity, they're going to call a travel agent. That's exactly what happens in operation. If you give the cop an Excel sheet and they have to look at the data for more than 3 minutes, they're going to say, forget about it, and they're going to make a decision based on gut feeling. Essentially, every professional is in the same situation. If it exceeds if the time to get to the information exceeds the time frame of making decisions, they would make a decision based on gut feeling and not on data. And the unfortunate circumstances of that is that the gut is a terrible decision maker. So you can't really rely on the gut feelings. Here is an example of this application in practice using kind of the Expedia approach in operational settings. So years ago, this automotive company discovered that their dealership costs were very high. And they sent all the analysts to analyze it, and they created a very fancy charts and things, and basically came and said, it's a quite simple reason why your costs are high. Dealers that have high costs, they replace more parts than dealers they have a high cost because they replace more parts than they should, and they should repair them instead. So very clear choice. Make the dealers repair parts rather than replace. Easier said than done. What do you think you do? This is the analysis. This is going back to the value chain. They now stopped at the analytic point. They got all the data from all the systems. They've done the analysis, and the analytical effect and the root cause of the high cost is known. Now, what do you do to change the fact? Right? That's the critical question. You can't just go to the dealerships and send a policy and say, repair parts and do not replace. Would they do it? No. Why? A mechanic is incented to move cars as quickly as possible outside of the dealership. That's what they are. They are paid for that to keep the customer happy. So when the mechanic sees the car and kind of opens the hood, and if they have to spend more than 10 minutes to decide whether they'll repair or replace, they go for the easy route and they replace. And there is no way any memo would convince them to go in any other way. So instead of doing this, they built for them this application pretty much like Expedia, when as soon as everything comes up, it presents them with all the options and all the choices they can make, and it provides them a very fairly simple recommendation or an ability to make a choice whether to replace or not. The simplest one is look historically and see that most of the repairs have been successful. Hence, they tell them you have a 75% chance probability to repair it, go with the action, and etc. So the system provides them with a choice opportunity, but also the system validates the choice. Let's say the mechanic goes and does the repair doesn't work, and they replace, they wasted a whole day on that. Now they have a purely perfect reason to say why they followed these instructions and why they did it. So that's the importance, and it shows you very clearly the difference between doing analysis and actually converting it into a choice supporting application. And the savings naturally are huge. So I'm moving to my last point about using the data from just going through the point of supporting decisions and making money in this way through applications, now getting to an asset management and doing a lot of the data management actually and analytics to support new types of asset management activities. We now have a new standard, ISO 55000, and that's about standards for asset management. And when we look at it, it's about better asset utilization and reduced risks, new business acquisition and international growth, new products, new revenue streams, and better quality assurance. A very important standard. And actually, if you dive into any of these categories, you quickly realize that this only can happen through data and analytics. And that's the biggest change that's happening. So we are moving from physical assets management into information-based asset management today. I already gave you the product examples, product quality assurance and better asset utilization. Very common examples, we have Boeing that's collecting data points, millions of data points on every flight to both optimize the engine utilization as well as fuel consumption. So that is a good example of using and leveraging data to extend the life of the asset and reduce the maintenance cost on it, as well as to materialize other types of savings. The more counterintuitive example is a customer of ours, Coty. They're a perfume manufacturer, one of the largest, actually the largest perfume manufacturer in the world today. And they came a couple of years ago with a strategy that they would grow through acquisition. And believe it or not, the biggest point in their strategy was data management, because they had to meet very strict regulatory requirements from the moment they decided to acquire a company to the moment of finishing the acquisition. They had to integrate the systems within 6 months. And if they failed to do that, they had to pay significant regulatory fines. So their entire acquisition strategy was based on one critical success factor. That was managing and integrating the data of the two companies. And they've done successfully over many years and met these regulatory, that they've actually established this to an art. So my point here is that new business acquisition and business growth is critically dependent on data today.